Welcome to the Libraries as Communities session. The library was founded by Colonel Occult, who also co-founded the Theosophical Society, which was founded in 1875 in New York. The Adyar Library was founded in 1886 and as a non-sectarian center of research in Eastern civilization, philosophy and religion. The library collection includes rare manuscripts, books and journals. The printed books are in many languages, including Sanskrit, Latin, Chinese, Japanese, Tibetan, etc. Very old and rare Indological works, books on different religions and philosophies, Chinese Tripitakas, encyclopedias, rare works in Latin, important research journals are amongst the valued possession of this library. Successive presidents of the TS have taken great interest and have encouraged the work of Adyar Library in every possible way. Libraries as Communities is an initiative to encourage, visit and make use of our library resources. We have speaker introducing a subject and books on that subject are arranged in the reading room upstairs. This morning we have Mr. Sukesh leading this group. Sukesh is a member of the Theosophical Society. He has a bachelor's degree in electronics and communication engineering and has an MBA from IIM Bangalore. He worked in Bharat Heavy Electrical Limited for 13 years and other IT industries for 17 years. Sukesh joined the editorial office at the Theosophical Society Adyar here in 2014 as a proofreader and has now become its head. He also looks after the conservation laboratory. Mr. Sukesh will be sharing his insights on the many worlds of Dr. Annie Besant. Sukesh.
Thank Jaishree in particular, the management in general for this opportunity. It is an onerous task, trying to describe Annie Besant in a short span of 30 to 40 minutes, but I'll try my best. So, let me start with the question. I mean, most of us know that she was involved in Theosophy and the Theosophical Society and all that, but is that what she did? Is that the only thing that she did? Many of you would have also heard about her activities in the Indian freedom movement and in various other areas. So, I'll try to cover most of the other things, but it's mainly in spite of all the other achievements of Annie Besant, it is the theosophical part which outshines everything else. So, most of us think of Annie Besant as the inspiring theosophical leader who wrote classics like The Ancient Wisdom and which explores profound truths about human existence. But the magic of Besant's legacy is that her wisdom wasn't limited to spiritual contemplation alone. It overflowed into courageous action across numerous areas of life. So, she passionately advocated for women's rights, social reform and education. She stood shoulder to shoulder with freedom fighters in India, championing a nation's awakening and independence, she ventured boldly into esoteric realms, co-authoring, for example, this occult chemistry along with Leadbeater, which needed extraordinary clairvoyant powers for seeing the unseen subatomic world. But perhaps most powerfully, Besant lived by one guiding principle. She considered that for any serious spiritual growth, the most important thing is service. Without service, there is not much, or any growth will be slow, and service is the way to and accelerate your evolution. She didn't just write about it, she embodied it. She founded the Theosophical Order of Service, which emphasizes true self-development, and it says it is not just meditation alone, but it is through compassionate action in the world that one can develop oneself. So today we will briefly explore some of these other dimensions of Annie Besant's life and writings, and then afterwards, you will have this great opportunity to see some of those books in person when we go upstairs. So this is, she was not just a writer or a thinker, she actually did what she preached, or she practiced what she preached. So I have broadly classified her books into a few categories. So I am starting with Theosophy, and that is because that is the maximum number of books are in that area. So starting with the Ancient Wisdom, it is an accessible introduction to the Theosophical teachings. I mean, any newcomer to Theosophy will get a fair idea of it by reading this book, and it's in a very simple and very engaging language. It talks about the evolution of the soul and the universal structure and so on. It starts with the physical plane. There are supposed to be 7 planes of existence. So it starts, the first chapter is on the physical plane, and then goes on to astral plane, Kamaloka, mental plane, Devachan, and then the Buddhic and Nirvanic planes. Then it goes on to have a treatment of reincarnation and karma, and then the law of sacrifice, where sacrifice simply means, for most kingdoms, it is just the evolution of law of evolution. But then in the human thing, it gets transmuted into the joy of giving. Finally, it deals with man's ascent, the final stages of evolution, the probationary path, the 4 qualifications, then the 4 stages on the path, and finally the master is born and then returns to serve humanity. So that is the Ancient Wisdom. Just an aside, I have a personal connection with this book, because this was the first book that was given to me when I first joined the society for proofreading. I must have taken at least 2-3 months to go through the whole thing, because I was just starting off. And then for a brief period I had gone to another department. And then I came back to the editorial department, and I was again given this book to proofread again, because of something had happened in between, and they had lost it, something happened. So I did it 2 times consecutively. This is the book which gave me an insight into Theosophy, what it is, and is also, when I read about Theosophy, it answered a lot of questions which I had in my mind for a long time. Of course, it created new questions, but it was, for maybe you can say, for the first time in my life, I had some kind of free from anxiety about the future. It is not about any material things, but usually, my things are about whether is this the right thing, where am I going, where am I coming from, all those existential questions. So after reading this, there was some, so that is my intimate connection with ancient wisdom. Then we move on to the 7 principles of man. It explores the septenary constitution of human beings. It details the physical and metaphysical components. It talks about the dense physical plane, dense physical body, then the etheric double, the prana, then the desire body, the mental body, the buddhic body and the atmic body. It is also the designated as Theosophical Manual number 1. Now, what is a Theosophical Manual? There was a complaint from many members and others of the public that Theosophy is very abstruse, very difficult to understand, very technical and so on. So a decision was taken to make some of the principles or some of the concepts simpler. So a series of manuals were written on specific topics so that people can easily read and understand that. So this was the Theosophical Manual number 1. Then we go on to the man and his bodies. This is again sort of similar to the 7 principles. It talks about the different bodies or layers of human existence, from the physical to the spiritual. And this is the Theosophical Manual number 7. Then we have a study in consciousness. This is a deep dive into the nature of consciousness, examining its origins and its manifestations. Annie Besant calls it a small contribution to the science of psychology. To quote her, she says that I hope it may serve as a stone in the complete building, enough to the apprentice task now, and prepare the rough stones for the use of the more expert workmen. Basically, she is using some Freemasonry imagery here, but she says that it is just a first step towards the entire understanding of the nature of consciousness. Then we move on to the esoteric Christianity. This is, I have not put this in any particular order, it's just in some random order, but mostly all related to Theosophy. So this book unveils the hidden meanings within Christian doctrines and connecting them to universal truths. The Christianity is seen as a dogmatic and rigid system, but what Annie Besant says is that it wasn't so at the beginning. It was the result of overzealous proselytizers who turned it into in the form that you see today. So it has, there are a lot of deep truths which underlie Christianity if you understand it the proper way. So she has written this book towards that. Another book that comes up is The Doctrine of the Heart. This emphasizes the importance of compassion and love in spiritual practice. It consists of extracts from letters that she received from some of her Indian friends, and it includes thoughts that have been helpful for them and also for others who seek the higher life and the path of discipleship. So it is offered in the hope of benefiting others in the same path. Then we come on to this book called The Spiritual Life. It's a guidance on living a life aligned with spiritual principles and inner growth. It consists of 4 lectures, it consists of a series of lectures in 4 volumes. And in summary, it says, the attitude of a searcher is the key. The striving is the important thing, not the goal. So in any situation, one just has to take the courage and try, and you will get the result. You will notice that when we go along, most of our works are collections of speeches or articles. She has written very few complete books, but when you look at the works of Annie Besant, you will find that there is over 150 or so, but most of them are compilations of her speeches and her articles. So, next we come to the book called In the Outer Court. This was prepared for aspirants for a deeper spiritual initiation, and it discusses purity and discipline. It consists of 5 lectures delivered in the Blavatsky Lodge in London in 1895. It starts off like a fable. Somewhere in space there is a great mountain, and then there is a road that winds around it upwards to the summit. There are 7 rounds, each turn has 7 stations, and the pilgrims have to climb round and round to reach the top. At the top there is a mighty golden temple, white, radiant, and that is the goal of all these people. They are on a pilgrimage to reach this. And those who finally reach the top after a lot of effort and time, they remain there to help those who are still climbing. So, this is basically a picture of how human evolution is portrayed. And this book was later published in a different title, From the Outer Court to the Inner Sanctum also. Then we have the Path of Discipleship. This outlines the stages and challenges of the spiritual aspirant's journey. It again consists of 4 lectures which were given at the 20th anniversary of the Theosophical Society in Adyar in 1895. It consists of the first steps, then qualifications for the discipleship, life of the disciple, and future programs of humanity. The next book is Avatars. It explores the concept of divine incarnations across various religious traditions. This consists again of 4 lectures which were delivered at the 24th anniversary of the TS in Adyar in 1899. She starts off with an admonition that is a recurring theme in all her works, and I quote, "Don't believe because I speak, don't accept because I utter these words. Your reason is the bar. Anything that does not pass the test of your reason has to be questioned." So, she says, you do not accept things just based on authority. You have to pass it through your intellect or your reasoning power, and then decide whether you want to accept it or not. I think the similar thing is mentioned in the Theosophist, the magazine, the Theosophist, also in every issue. Then we go on to the basis of morality, which is an investigation of the foundations of ethical behavior from a theosophical perspective. It deals with the philosophy, spirituality, and ethics of morality. A sentence which stands out in this book is, "Morality is the adaptation of our actions for the promotion of the general welfare and happiness of mankind." So, basically what it means is it's not fixed or cast in stone. For each situation, each society itself, the basis of morality can be different. Then we come to the changing world, which addresses the shifts in societal and spiritual paradigms, and it was published in 1909. It consists of a set of 15 lectures, 8 of which were public lectures, and 7 of them were given to students of Theosophy. The Evolution of Life and Form is a book which it discusses the progression of life and its various manifestations through the lens of Theosophy. It consists of 4 lectures again, delivered on the 23rd anniversary of the TS in 1898. It consists of ancient and modern sciences. I mean, these are the topics mentioned: functions of the gods, evolution of life, and evolution of form. Then we have the laws of the higher life. It highlights the principles governing spiritual existence beyond the physical realm. It again consists of 3 lectures which were given at the annual convention of the Indian section in 1902, and the main topics are larger consciousness, the law of duty, which means beyond the usual duties that people have towards their society or to the parents or to the other material duties. The most important thing is to serve one's fellow man. So that is called the law of duty. And then there is a law of sacrifice, which again is described as it's the only way a man can go on the path. I mean, until a person learns the law of sacrifice, the progression is very limited. Then we come to the self and its sheaths, which is again a sort of similar to the earlier couple of books, the man and his bodies and so on. It examines the true nature of the self and the various coverings that obscure it. It again consists of 4 lectures delivered in the 19th anniversary of the TS in 1894. Then we come to thought power, its control and culture. It delves into the influence of thoughts on reality and methods to harness this power. So it talks about the nature of thought, the creation of illusion, thought transference, beginnings of thought, memory, growth of thought, concentration, obstacles to concentration, strengthening of thought power, and helping others by thought. So basically, thought has got a lot of power, and its control is very important, both to block out negative thoughts as well as to promote positive thoughts. And you can also help others just by using thought. That is how it concludes. Then we come to the wisdom of the Upanishads. It is not something which takes 1 or 2 Upanishads and explains it in detail, but it is a general thing which about the Upanishads in general. It consists again of 4 lectures delivered on the 31st anniversary in December 1906. It interprets the ancient Hindu scriptures. It sheds light on profound philosophical teachings. So in specific Upanishad, it is a distillation of them all, and the main topics were Brahman is all, Ishvara, Jivatmas, and the wheel of birth and death. Unique thing about this is that she starts her speech, this was in, as I said, 31st anniversary in 1906. She starts her speech by saying that this was the first time she was speaking in Adyar without the presence of the founder president, Colonel Olcott, on the stage. He was very ill, so he couldn't take part in this, and he passed on within a couple of months of this occurrence on 17th February 1907. So, I mean, that is just in passing, it is nothing to do with the book, but an additional information. She translated the Bhagavad Gita with the help of a close associate and friend, Bhagavan Das. Her idea was that anything you want to learn, should learn it from the original. So there must have been a lot of other translations of Bhagavad Gita at that time, but she wanted, so because of that she learned Sanskrit and then translated the Bhagavad Gita for its insights and its spiritual messages. And we have I think 2 or 3 versions of Bhagavad Gita. One is just the English, I mean one of the Sanskrit and the English just like that without any explanation. Then there is another one which is the Sanskrit, the transliteration in Roman, then explanations of specific words, and then the total explanation. And then there is a third one which is there is no Sanskrit at all, it is more like an exposition of the various parts of the Bhagavad Gita. So, we have these three books all by Annie Besant. The next is Dharma. This discusses the concept of duty and righteousness in personal and societal contexts. It consists of 3 lectures which she delivered at the annual convention of the Indian section in October 1898. It talks about various things like the differences in dharma practiced by different peoples, how the evolution and what is right and wrong and so on. Then comes karma. This explores the law of cause and effect as it pertains to moral actions and spiritual evolution. I mean, we all know about karma quite a bit, but I am sure there is a lot more to learn. And this was also designated as Theosophical Manual number 8. Closely related topic is reincarnation, which is again another book written by her, which it analyzes the doctrine of rebirth and its implications for personal growth, and this was designated as Theosophical Manual number 2. Then comes an introduction to yoga. It provides an overview of yogic philosophy and practices for spiritual development. It consisted of 4 lectures delivered at the 32nd anniversary in 1907. The 4 lectures were the nature of yoga, the various schools of thought, yoga as science and yoga as practice. Then there is another book that addresses the religious diversity in India and the challenges and the solutions. It is called The Religious Problem India. Again consisted of 4 lectures delivered on the 26th annual convention of the TS. And those 4 lectures were Islam, Jainism, Sikhism and Theosophy. In fact, she has published, separate books on each of these. There's one called the 6 Great Religions, and then there are individual books on each of those 6 religions, like Islam and all these things. Then we come to the Theosophy and the New Psychology. This book again consists of 6 lectures published in 1904. It was intended for students of modern psychology using theosophical teachings as a guide. And he says that it is truly a lamp in a dark place. So, it connects contemporary psychological theories with esoteric teachings, bridging the gap between modern science and ancient wisdom. Then we have The World and Its God. Many of these titles are not very commonly known because I think some of them are out of print and so on. So, this book contemplates the relationship between the universe and the divine, and it's not a big book, it's a pamphlet. Then there is a book called Theosophy, which is an introductory treatise on the principles and objectives of theosophical study. Then Theosophy and Life's Deeper Problems, which offers solutions to profound existential questions. This again consists of 4 lectures delivered in Bombay at the 40th anniversary of the TS in 1915. The titles were God, Man, Right and Wrong and Brotherhood. So, in the foreword of this book she says, the lectures really need no foreword. They are frankly propagandist being delivered in the city of Bombay on the occasion of the return to that city for the first time since the anniversary held in December 1882 with 15 delegates present. So, in December 1882 is when the first thing started and there were only 15 people present. So, now this was in 1915, that is after about 33 years, going back to the same city, and this convention was happening there, the 40th anniversary. Then we come to Theosophy and Social Reconstruction. This is for it's about applying the spiritual principles for the restructuring of society for everybody's betterment. And then there is also a book called The Theosophy and the Theosophical Society. This explains the mission and work of the Theosophical Society in promoting universal brotherhood. This is again derived from 4 lectures during the annual convention in December 1912. It talks about Theosophy or Paravidya, the open road to the masters, the root of all religions, and the Theosophical Society, its meaning, purpose and functions. So, with that we come to many of the theosophical books have been covered. This is more on the occult side of it. These may not be totally in different silos, because there may be a lot of overlap between these. So, it may not be possible to put any book in a particular category. So, here we start off with occult chemistry. It's I think one of the biggest books, and maybe I am not sure whether it's well known. Here it is a purely scientific research. He has done research along with Leadbeater on the chemical elements, and it's a groundbreaking work because it describes atomic particles, subatomic particles, new elements which were, and this was at a time when most of these things were not discovered by science. So, these were many of the findings were in anticipation of what science was going to discover later. So, that is and this entire thing, there was no scientific tools used. It was all done by clairvoyant vision. So, that is the remarkable thing about this book. And A.P. Sinnett had something to say about this book in the next edition. Introduction, he said, though scientific men have hitherto preferred to progress gradually from point to point, disliking leaps in the dark, the leap now made is only in the dark for those who will not realize that the progress to be accomplished by means of instrumental research must sooner or later be supplemented by subtler methods. So, he says it remains to be seen not how far, but rather how soon the scientific world at large will accept the conclusions of this volume as a definite contribution to science, blending the science of the laboratory with that variety that has hitherto been called occult. So, this is what Sinnett had to say about it. And he has also said that he reviewed the whole book, and there was nothing much to be removed from it. He was given free hand to edit the book by the authors, and he said there was nothing much to remove. He just added 1 or 2 chapters for making it more simpler for people to understand. Then we come to thought forms. This is again co-authored with Leadbeater. It vividly illustrates how thoughts and emotions produce distinct visual patterns and shapes, and it emphasizes their subtle yet powerful influence. So, if anybody has seen this thought forms book, it has got a lot of illustrations, and the illustrations are in color, and these illustrations are of specific thought in form. So, you find various red colors, brown colors, green colors, and each of them denoting various emotions, and it is not only the colors but the shapes also. So, how what jealousy looks like, what let us say love looks like, and even there are some compound thought forms, like there is a picture of a church when the service is going on, and you can see the church is very small at one corner of the thing, but the entire thing is having a very big image, which is supposed to be the thought form produced by this activity, the collective activity in the church. So it's a very interesting book. It is also supposed to have had a major influence in art in Europe, especially, and other, in general throughout the world. So a lot of research is going on these thought forms now, and among various people, not only from within the Theosophy Society but outside. So again, Annie Besant has told in this book, it is our earnest hope, as it is our belief, that this little book will serve as a striking moral lesson to every reader, making him realize the nature and power of his thoughts, acting as a stimulus to the noble and a curve on the base. Then we come to the building of the cosmos. This book explores the cosmic manifestation and spiritual evolution, detailing the underlying forces that shape the universe and consciousness. It is again derived from 4 lectures at the annual convention in Adyar in 1893. So it is divided into the building of the cosmos, sound, building of the cosmos, fire, and then yoga and symbolism. The next one is the initiation, the perfecting of man. This book clarifies the various stages of spiritual initiation, revealing how individuals evolve towards our higher spiritual consciousness and mastery. Then there is something called Superhuman Men in History and Religion. This is again a list of lectures delivered in London and Stockholm in 1913. It examines the historical and religious figures who were believed to have possessed extraordinary abilities and interpreting their feats through an esoteric lens. Death and After is another book which examines the process of death from an esoteric perspective, providing comforting and insightful descriptions of post-mortem states and the soul's continuing journey. It is also designated as the Theosophical Manual number 3. Another category that I came across was India and its awakening and nationalism. The first one is The Birth of New India. It's a collection of writings and speeches on Indian affairs. We have recently planning to publish this again after a long time. So it chronicles India's political and spiritual awakening, capturing the country's growing demand for self-governance and independence. For the convenience of future generations of students, the talks have been categorized as political, educational, social and religious. And an extra talk or extra thing of interest is her farewell talk, which is addressed to my brothers and sisters in India on the eve of her internment at Ooty. The background is this, she formed this thing called All India Home Rule League along with Lokmanya Tilak, and this was the first kind of political party which was striving for a regime change in India. Before that we had the Indian National Congress, but that was at that time not really a party, it was just an annual convention or annual congress where people used to meet and discuss and go. So this All India Home Rule League happened to be the first something which sort of resembled a party for, and which was striving for the regime change. So because of this, her and the two of them, Lokmanya Tilak and Annie Besant, joined hands and asked for this change of the way India was being administered. So, she was arrested in June 1917 and taken to Ooty. She was under house arrest. But then there were massive protests throughout India. This was before Gandhiji and all came into the picture. The massive protests throughout India, and she was finally released in September 1917 and had a heroic welcome. And this immediately after this, she took over as the president of the Indian National Congress in the December of the same year. And as you all know, she was the first woman president of the Indian National Congress. Another book is The Case for India. This was again, it is not a book actually, it is the speech that she did as the president and the presidential address at the 32nd Indian National Congress in 1917 in Calcutta. So, this was a historic address, and it emphasized the importance of unity, self-determination and spiritual leadership in India's quest for freedom. The next book is a bird's eye view of India's past as the foundation for India's future. This connects India's historical heritage to its potential future, urging Indians to derive strength and direction from their rich cultural legacy. And another one is How India Wrought for Freedom. It offers a detailed narrative of India's independence struggle, highlighting critical moments, key figures and Annie Besant's own active involvement. A thought-provoking set of reflections, that is the India Bond or Free, a World Problem. It's about India's struggle between the colonial independence and self-governance, and exploring the spiritual implications of freedom. Something similar is India a Nation, a plea for Indian. So, this is actually something which was a plea to the British government about, so it articulates Besant's vision for India as a unified, spiritually enlightened nation destined to influence global consciousness. In addition, she had done many lectures in Ceylon and Australia, which are not completely on Indian thing, but there are some lectures in those which are related to India's broader struggle for freedom. Then we move on to her works on women's rights and social reform. So, her autobiography again has sections which refer to her endeavor in these areas, social reform and women's rights. And she describes her personal struggles and victories in the fight for. Before she came to India, she was involved in all these women's rights and so on. There is a couple of books which come later which talk about that in detail. She talks about then another one is The Political Status of Women, which is a passionate and pioneering advocacy for women's equal rights, emphasizing political representation, education and social empowerment. And it was basically a speech, and the significance of this in her own words is, my real public life dates from my first public lecture on the political status of women for the Cooperative Institute in August 1874. So, this was her very first speech. Then there is a book on the law of population, its consequences and its bearing upon human conduct and morals. I mean, the title itself is self-explanatory. Then there is another one, Marriage as it was, as it is and as it should be, a plea for reform. This is a critical examination of traditional marriage norms, advocating for equality, mutual respect and genuine companionship between partners. It was presented in two parts. The first part was called marriage and the second one was called divorce. Basically, she describes all the rules and the social what was prevalent at that time, and examining each part of it and saying what is right and what is wrong and so on. This white slavery in London is about the match girls. There was a match factory where they used to make these matches, and women were involved in this. I mean, it was mostly women. I think mostly in any kind of work where it requires very intricate hand-eye movement and so on, usually women are employed. So maybe that's how women were there, but most of them were women and they had very bad working conditions. It was highly exploitative. They were given very little wages just to keep body and soul together, but nothing more. Annie Besant took this up when she was in England and she fought for the protection of these women and so on. And one more thing in this case was that they used to work with white phosphorus and that was very bad for health. So the women were suffering from health issues also. Then there's another book which is My Path to Atheism. This is an early book of hers which is, it documents her courageous challenge to conventional religious and social norms. So she is one of the earliest voices in advocating freedom of thought and social equality. The background for this is that she was originally married to a Church of England clergyman, and she found a lot of the things which was happening in the church as not reasonable or against reason. And I mean, some of the things mentioned in the Bible was not, according to her, very right. So she left it, and then she had to suffer a lot personally because of that. But then, you know, she describes that early phase. Then this English socialism is actually just one article of hers in a collection called Fabian Essays in Socialism. So it explores the socialist ideals and labor conditions, economic equality, etc. This actually is not really a separate, but somehow it evolved as a separate category. The first book is Introduction to the Science of Peace. See, the Science of Peace was a book by Bhagavan Das, who I earlier referred. He was the secretary of the Central Hindu College, Benares, which is the present Benares Hindu University. And this was again started by Annie Besant. And he was also the general secretary of the Indian section at that time. So he had written a book on metaphysics called The Science of Peace. And Annie Besant felt that it is a little abstruse, it's not, people are not sufficiently understanding what it has. So she wrote an introduction so that it has some practical guidance on achieving inner harmony and global peace and so on. So this is an introduction to the Science of Peace by Bhagavan Das. Yoga is a book on yoga, and not the physical yoga, but the philosophy and its practices, and it's emphasizing its pathway to spiritual awakening and holistic health. Then we have a couple of books. These were not written by Annie Besant, but taken from her various writings and talks and teachings. The first one is called Meditations on the Path and its Qualifications, compiled by E.G. Cooper. Second one is an Annie Besant calendar, daily meditations, compiled by Theodore Besterman. Both these are in the form of short passages, and it is structured in a way that there are 365 of them, and it is given a day, month and a date, so that a person, somebody who is reading it, they can take one of those passages for a day and contemplate on it. So that is why it's called Meditations on the Path. So you can contemplate, meditate on it. The next day you take a new one, so that over a period of 1 year you complete an entire range of thoughts. And then on education, she had a lot of things to say. She said that should be the basis of national life, as the title goes, and it talks about the crucial nature of education for building a morally and spiritually strong society. and it should be holistic and ethical is what she has mentioned. This was again a lecture at Adyar in February 1908. She specifically talked about education of Indian girls, because in those days girls were not really given much education, and mainly because of the social customs, and so she stressed the necessity for empowering women through culturally appropriate yet progressive education. So, this is also the pamphlet number 25. Then you have Principles of Education, which is a scheme applying to national education in India. Another book called Theosophy and Education, where theosophical principles are, how they can be used for educational practices and cultivating wisdom and ethics and so on. Then education of the depressed classes. Here she argues strongly for providing quality education to the marginalized communities, because she, according to her, this is the only way that you can bring back equal opportunities for all groups. The only way for the marginalized communities would be through education. So, this is about that. Then the Central Hindu College, which I told earlier, this was established by her first as a school, then became a college and then a university. So, it is about its ideals and work and so on. And then there are some in this lectures in Australia and Ceylon also had some lectures related to education. Now comes the last category, but not the least, or maybe the most important, that is service. So, she has very clearly said that service is the only path to spiritual growth. So, on this various pamphlets and writings have been, the Theosophical Order of Service was established by her for this purpose, and she has written various pamphlets and writings towards this. Some of these other books which I had covered earlier, but they also have some relevance in the service area. There is a specific one called Practical Work for Theosophists. So, instead of generally talking about service as a great ideal and all that, this is a specific guidance on how spiritual principles can be translated into active service, and positively urging Theosophists to engage in societal issues. There is a pamphlet which is a lecture called Service and Sacrifice. It discusses how selfless action and personal sacrifice are powerful spiritual disciplines which accelerate inner growth and benefit society. This immediate future is not related to service, but since that was not put in any other category, I just added it here. So, it got a series of 5 lectures again in England, or it contains about a growth of a world religion, coming of a world teacher, social problems, self-sacrifice or revolution. These are 2 ways of that people have thought of in social problems. Either you do a revolution or you try to change yourself. The changing yourself is something which very few people are able to understand. So, I have sort of covered all the, or not all the books, but some of the books that I came across. There are a lot more where that came from, and that is now your job to go and find those. So, I will just conclude. If somebody is wondering, Annie Besant lived about 150 years, 200 years back, and so what is the relevance now? See, some of these ideas, universal brotherhood, it's as applicable now as it used to be then, because the world is facing a lot of divisions. So, this is very relevant now. Then women's empowerment, even though it was bad then, now also it is not any better. So, a lot of things, lot of improvements have happened, but which again has uncovered so many new things, and so there is a lot of work to be done in that area. You can still take, get inspired by her action and what she did in those days. So then this bridging science and spirituality, I mean this is again, in those days it was considered as totally different. Now there are some attempts from some areas to bridge these two. I mean there is, now people talk about quantum physics being sort of similar to quantum spirituality and so on. Then the power of service again, that is very relevant in these days as it used to be earlier. Education for holistic growth. On the surface it looks like we have a great education system, but we know that it is not sufficient, and various key values and ideas and ethics are not imparted in the present day's education. So we need to, and I suppose our ATA is an effort in that direction. Then interreligious harmony, still we need that, and the courage to stand for truth and justice, that is also very much required at present. So all these things were what Annie Besant stood for, and they are still very relevant in today's society. So now you have heard a lot about Annie Besant. She actually wrote, exhorting people to do various things that she considered as important. And now today we all have this opportunity. And one great thing about Annie Besant is, any other leader, you may feel that okay, that is not something that I am inclined to, like service or anything. But in Annie Besant's case, she has worked in so many areas that there has to be one area which resonates with everybody. So that is something that each one of us can take up. So now after this, you can go straight to the hall and get more into it. And any questions you have, you can read those books and understand.
Thank you very much, Sukesh, for the lovely and beautiful presentation, saying it briefly about some of her books, as you said. As a mark of our appreciation, we present to you these books. Thank you very much.
And I should be thanking you more for the opportunity.